I listened to your, I guess, super generous and epic 3 hour long podcast that you did for HerbRally, the Q&A. And I remember you mentioning that and it resonated with me as well. You were kind of alluding to the fact that herbalism, it's like the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know, and it's like this ever evolving thing. And I definitely resonate with that, because that's why I'm so attracted to it too. But I think a lot of people get stuck in the learning phase and not the experimenting phase. And it's fun that you kind of did it the other way around. And I feel like we probably hold on to so much more in our minds when we can actually have tangible experiences to draw back on. And
yeah, totally. I think that it's like, I'll tell students sometimes, I'm like, if you were taking, like, no one would take cooking classes or go to cooking school and be like, I'm going to go to cooking school for 2 years, and then at the end of it, I can try actually cooking. Like, you have to cook to learn to cook. And if you're learning about herbs, you have to like use stuff to learn how to use stuff. And I think that people, they feel intimidated by that. But I mean, realistically, most of the stuff that we use, as long as, you're not making stuff out of aconite or, like, and I know that there are people who are really enamored by all the strong or, low dose herbs. And they want to use those because they feel, I don't know, maybe like stronger things or stronger rather than like they're more forceful, but they're not necessarily stronger than something gentle, And if we're working with like the most common herbs we use in Western herbalism, it's unlikely you're gonna hurt someone or damage somebody. You might upset someone's stomach, or you might aggravate their dry cough by drying it out too much or do something like that, but nothing that's, substantially dangerous.
definitely. And from all those negative outcomes, you learn probably even more out of,
Right.
uncovering something that maybe you weren't achieving necessarily to begin with.
Oh yeah, especially if you're self-experimenting. You're like,
Yeah.
well, I'm not gonna do that again. Now
It's
that
so
happens if you experiment on your partner too, right? If you kind of sort of not really, but just right on the border poison your partner, you'd be like, I maybe shouldn't do that again.
yeah, maybe not this time. I give great kudos to Brandon for still putting up with me and all the things that I make him try.
Uh,
Although I think he has a wicked palate for bitters now, which I think he's pretty proud of, and certain other things. But yeah, it's fun to have a partner to try things on, and it's to try the same thing on both people, because I find it's so different, our reactions to things, obviously based on our different constitutions and all that kind of stuff too.
I really lucked out because other than my wife being, well, girlfriend, partner, wife, being like super awesome, she also has like the completely sort of like opposite constitution that I have. So it's like I'm just never gonna get a damp sinus infection, like it's just kind of not, it's never happened before. So it's probably not gonna happen. And I have gotten damp upper respiratory infections, but they've been really pretty transient. But like some of the stuff that have been like the best herbs for her, they're not good for me. And I also kind of going back to the cooking, like I feel learning about herbalism that I need to I I don't give anybody anything that I haven't used myself. Even if it's not sort of like energetically the most appropriate thing for me, like I want to know why it's not. And so I've tried all of this stuff. There might be like a few supplements, like nutritional supplements that I haven't used, but plant-wise, I don't think I've ever given anyone something that I haven't used myself. And I feel like that would also be weird. It would be like going back to the cooking analogy, it'd be like, oh, I made you this food. Like I've never tasted it, but I made it for you to taste, which that would be unusual. That would be a strange way to go about cooking.
Definitely. And it would almost be similar to, if you have a friend and then there's this person you never met and you're like, hey, you should go hang out with this person. I think you'd like them, even though you've never met this person in your life or something or other, because there's no experience to draw on.
Yeah, sometimes I've been somewhere and I'll be teaching, and it could be an herb walker, it could be in a class, and someone will ask me a question about a plant. And I always try to be pretty clear, like, I know certain things about that plant, but I haven't used it, right? So like I
Yeah,
know that plant is demulcent and I have a sense of it, right? But I haven't used it. So like bear that in mind, and like that I'm not speaking from experience here. And I think that I wish that was more of a norm. And maybe, well, I guess as much speaking, but also like writing, because I still do a lot of like open community classes, which means that I have the course that I run that goes from, April through October, and there's an in-person version and there's an online version. And people come, and generally the people that are taking that class, like they're interested in more like learning herbalism. But I also have lots of day classes that might be like anywhere from like 2.5 to 6 or 7 hours long that anyone can just come to because they're kind of vaguely interested. And those people will often say like, what are good books to get? And I think that like, there's so many different ways to answer that question, depending on like what aspect of herbalism somebody is into, right? But one of the things that's like a requirement for me is like, if you're getting a book about herbs, it should be written by someone who uses the herbs that they're writing about, because I've seen so many situations where people will, I'll just not mention any by name. So many situations where people will be like, oh, I got this book and it has so much information. And I've seen a lot of books. And, when I hear about a book that's like really popular, I try to find a copy and look at it. And not uncommonly, I'll be like, I don't think they've ever tasted this plant. I don't think they've used this plant. I know where they got that sentence and that sentence and that sentence and that sentence. Like I see how they piecemealed it together. And it's not like we don't want to reference other people's work, but sometimes, there's knowing about stuff versus actually knowing stuff. And, if you were going to get your brakes fixed, you probably want to get your brakes fixed by somebody who fixed brakes before and not just read about fixing brakes.
Absolutely. Absolutely.